Welcome to the Biz Coach Show, brought to you by My Biz Coaches. Our show is focused on giving entrepreneurs the edge they need to succeed. Learn more at mybizcoaches.com. Your host is Eric Whitmore, owner of My Biz Coaches. Eric is a business coach, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker. Eric is passionate about sharing his knowledge and insights with small business owners so they can transform their businesses and achieve peak success. Learn more at mybizcoaches.com. Well, Eric, it's great to be with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, David, and yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited for our episode for today. For those of you who regularly watch our show, listen, you probably know that we generally have pretty well thought out topics and questions, but we're going a different approach today, and we're going unscripted. So we'll see how this new format works out. Just Eric and I kind of going back and forth just on some different thoughts on a topic. And our topic today is delegation, which is something that I know has served Eric and myself well throughout our careers, and something that we've had to teach others, whether that's managers, business owners, etc. And excited to share some of those insights with you today in a new, fun, and unscripted format. So, Eric, let's kind of start things off. And when you think delegation, like what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I think about how I can get somebody else to do my job for me.
Nice. Okay, there you go.
I told you we're unscripted here. I'm just going to let it loose.
Dude, absolutely. I love it.
No, and unfortunately, that's probably what a lot of people think.
Yes, for sure.
You know, after last week's, we're talking about leadership, and then I wrote a post on LinkedIn, and we did some other stuff. Actually, I think I did 3 or 4 things specifically about leadership last week, and I think that it's like an ongoing theme, but. One of the most important components, and literally, I had a meeting today with somebody who helps business owners strategically plan their exits from a financial perspective. So, what are some of the different ways you can reduce your tax exposure when you sell your business, when you have a big transaction like that? How do you reduce your tax exposure? What are some of the things you can do? But one of the topics that came up is what are some of the challenges that business owners struggle through in that process, and very specifically, one of the big hangups ends up being there's not a leadership transition structure in place,
right?
And it literally came down to the idea that the owners aren't necessarily very good at delegating,
right?
So they never develop the number 2 to be the number 1 at some point in the future. And consequently, they have their key people just aren't there. They may very well be capable, but the owner's not good at relinquishing responsibility and learning to delegate, or teaching to, in delegating and teaching and preparing that for individual to take over. And lo and behold, we come up with these statistics like 75-80% of businesses never sell. It's one of the key components that contributes to that. So.
Yeah.
And to add to that, not just where as business owners, but even in professional world, a lot of people choose not to do it. And we could probably go through a ton of different reasons why, but a lot of people don't do it because they're afraid.
Yeah.
If I delegate and I teach somebody else how to do my job, then am I effectively replacing myself?
Right.
Right. I think I would say that that's very short-sighted. I know you would agree with me. But at the same time, right, that how do you root that out unless the current leadership of a particular organization recognizes that and actually can effectively coach to that?
Yeah.
But that doesn't, people go through different life cycles. There's so many different reasons why people don't delegate well. But when I think of delegation, it's how do I take the next person in charge and prepare them to do my job?
Yeah.
Or 2, next 2 or 3 people, even in some cases.
Right. Yeah, and I tend to think about it. No surprise here, right? From a talent development perspective, and training and growth, and up-leveling people's skill sets, because that's one of the huge advantages. Is if I can teach other people how to do what I can do, then that frees me up to go do other stuff. And then when I take on other stuff, then it might be new projects, or in the context of a small business owner, maybe I can take on, more strategic stuff, or I can work on getting more accounts instead of, following up on, people that owe us money. Right. So some of those things that allows the business to actually grow. And when you don't have delegation, the business isn't growing, the individuals aren't growing, and you kind of run into this stagnation. And so it's really one of the most effective ways to train somebody when it's done right. And I know we probably both have thoughts on that, is when it's done right, you're empowering somebody with knowledge and skills they didn't have before you started delegating to them. And then, ideally, then they can take that thing and pass it on to somebody else, so that as you take on more, they can take on more and your whole organization grows. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could go on and on about different stories in the past where that was successful. And I think that the key is to understand is that when you do a good job of preparing the next in line in leadership to take on more responsibility, as you alluded to, what you're basically doing, to your point, is to free yourself up to work on more high value tasks.
Right.
And, literally it breaks down to, in years ago, we created a time management program and we talked, we went into, why time management was so, what were some of the key components of effective time management. One specifically was delegation. And I remember you had used a visual representation for the PowerPoint that we did. And one was with a stream that was flowing and everything's, and then stream looked really nice and, it's clear water. And then the other one was a dammed up pond.
Yep. I remember that.
It was all mucky on top and everything like that. It looked really nasty. It probably had, bugs flying around and everything like that. And it was, this is without good delegation, and then the flowing stream was with good. And it's actually a great example. It could be communication. The one thing that when it happens, a lot of businesses is when there's bad delegation, there's also typically really bad communication.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not flowing. People below a certain threshold are not being educated on why we do what we do. And, anybody who's ever engaged with me knows really well that my biggest pet peeve is I want to understand exactly why we do what we do.
Right.
And if somebody can't break that down for me or isn't willing to break that down for me, it's super frustrating.
Yeah.
Because I'm why do we do this? Because my bet is if I'm looking at it and it looks efficient, if it looks remotely inefficient to me, I need to understand why we do what we do. And if it logically it all makes sense, then I'm like, okay, well, what are some other ways that we can make this more efficient?
Yeah.
If we have to maintain it, this strategy, this structure, whatever, fine. What else could we incorporate to make this more efficient?
Yeah.
But often what I find is people are so myopic and so this is how it has to be that they never look at it holistically and say, what are other ways that we could do this that would get us a better result?
Yeah.
And because they don't do that, and they choose not to do that, it doesn't get better. And I think that's a direct correlation to effective delegation.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Let
absolutely.
somebody else figure out another strategy to try and do it.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, because sometimes they're going to find a better, more efficient way to do it. And I think that's one of the things that people miss out on is not only can you have somebody do it, you might have somebody with a better skill set in that area that can do it more effectively. Or we talk all the time. And in fact, we've got some resources on this that we'll maybe talk about at the end, but around automation, AI, software, right? You may not need to delegate to a person, but bring in some automation and free yourself up there too. So a bunch of different ways you can look at that, but holding on to it usually is not the best way.
No, absolutely not. And I'm going to say almost never.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that the irony of that scenario in that statement is in the grand scheme of things, when you look at it, if I'm doing something a certain way for any extended period of time, the likelihood that I've actually looked at it objectively to determine whether or not there's a more efficient way to do it drops by every day that I've continued to do it a certain way.
Yeah,
because now I build up the routines and the habits that make this efficient for me in my mind.
Yeah.
But also block me from being open to looking at it and stepping back and objectively looking at it and saying, is there a more efficient way of doing this?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and for every day that I build that routine, right. I'm trying to think of the analogy that I think it was Jack Canfield used with me, but every time so you're strand, just like a muscle gets stronger with the fibers, right? And so every time you tear down the muscle tissue and then it rebuilds, you're increasing the number of strands, the muscle fibers that are right. And not only are you tearing them down, but when they rebuild even stronger with more to it. And you're doing the same thing with muscle memory and doing an activity. So the more that you do that, you're actually making it almost impossible to want to or even consider go back and look at it. Is there a better, more efficient way to do it? So the best thing you could possibly do for your organization is to introduce new people to these processes and systems, challenge them and say, look, this is how I do it, but you come up with a better way and you tell me, that's fine, right? But let's test it, right? Let's make sure. I mean, you don't just open the floodgates and say, yeah, just go figure it out. And that's actually part of the problem. That's the reverse of what we're talking about. But, bring somebody in and say, okay, this is what I do. Yeah. And then be patient and allow them to maybe lose some productivity, maybe make a few mistakes, but you have to be patient and allow that to happen for the delegation process to really work. And I remember extensively that program when you put that together with me. When I first couple times I presented it, people were like super apprehensive about that part, about delegation specifically. Right. They're like, yeah, but they're going to mess it all up. And I'm like, exactly, that's what you want. Yeah. Because if they're messing it up, unless it's completely, off, they're like messing up bad, right?
Yeah. But people are dying or,
Yeah, exactly. But generally speaking, if they're just making mistakes, they're learning. Right? That's the learning process. You have to fail forward, right? We hear that all the time. People say fail forward, but people say it who know and understand that logic behind it. But the vast majority of people hear it and that they disregard it, because when it comes right down to it, no, if I want it done right, I got to do it myself.
Yep.
And when I hear that, I'm like, you've just relinquished yourself to a lifetime of servitude of whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like you'll never break away from that.
And that's at least for me, the biggest issue or misconception I see around delegation is people don't understand exactly what you're saying, which is, yes, you will get a momentary loss in quality or production or whatever, metric you're using to evaluate that delegated item. But the reality is that short-term, interruption opens up so much more long-term volume and bandwidth for you and for the other individual that it's worth it. And you just have to be willing to go through that discomfort. And, you're a big proponent of this is, you got to be uncomfortable to grow, right? Like that's the catalyst for growth. So if you're not uncomfortable and people aren't making mistakes, then your business is stagnant.
Right. And I think, to be fair, particularly to business owners, although I'm sure this extends to a lot of other people as well. But I think in a business owner's perspective, most people who go into and start their own business are actually the reason they did it is because they're betting on themselves.
Yeah, sure.
And so when they get into, particularly let's say it's a sensitive component of a business, it could be the sales component of a business, or it could be, the bookkeeping, whatever, right? So there's and they probably have either some preconceived notions from bad experiences in the past or whatever, but for whatever reason, they're like, no, this is like the crux of the business. Nobody else can do this but me. I have to do this, right? And that's not necessarily bad in the beginning when you're starting it, but at some point for the organization to grow organically, you have to let go and have somebody else come in and take the reins and lead the horse or manage the sales, whatever it is, whatever analogy you want to use. Let somebody else do it for a little bit so you can at least walk away. And it was like if you're I was thinking about if you're in a sailboat, right? And I see people and they're like, here, come over here and take the wheel, and you're in the sailboat. But imagine how freeing that is for somebody who's always sailing the boat.
Right. Yeah.
And I actually let go of the wheel and somebody else can actually do it. And even if it's only 80 or 90%, it allows me to go eat.
Yeah, right.
It allows me to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Get a drink. Right. Exactly. But I don't have to walk away and completely ignore the situation. I can just step back and what?
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier. I can now observe. Because while I'm doing it, I can't observe myself. I'm just not. We're not wired that way.
Yeah.
But if you and I are working on a project together, and I say, David, you do this, and I sit back and I let you drive, and I watch you drive, and I see you make mistakes, I can coach you through that process. But I'm also taking in new information that's saying, hey, is this really the most efficient way to do this?
Yeah.
Now I can objectively look at the circumstance and determine, is this good or not good? But I can't do that when I'm doing it all myself. That's the piece that I can't and it's so frustrating to try and drive that point home to somebody, because I'm like, that's what's holding your business up. That's what's keeping you from getting you to $1 million in revenue or whatever the target goal is for that individual.
Yeah. And you brought up, a number of important points, but I think going back to your sailing analogy, one of the things that resonate with me in that is there's follow-up and support, right? So you're not just, hey, take control of the ship. I'm going to be below deck taking a nap. Good luck. Hope we don't die, right? It's I'm going to keep an eye on you and make sure things are going well. And if not, I'm going to, jump in and, hey, maybe let's, tack this way or whatever. And just giving some of that guidance until they really, get the experience they need to be good at it. So I think that's an important point. I also think something else that's important, kind of a little bit of a juxtaposition to something else we talked about, which is, don't hold on to that thing forever. I do think it's important for whoever it is, whether that's a business owner or somebody in the business, let somebody do it long enough to figure out kind of the ins and outs and what the issues are, and develop a general way of doing it that seems to be effective before handing it off. Otherwise, you got multiple people who don't know the right way to do it, and you're just handing one fire to somebody else, right? Instead of, hey, I've got this kind of dialed in, it could probably be better. Here's what I've been doing, and then I'd love to see where you take it from there. But at least get it kind of dialed in before you hand it off to that other person.
Yeah, and that was part of what I referenced earlier, is that's the reverse of what we're talking about, right? That's the dumping.
Right. Yeah.
Like, hey, I don't like doing this. You're the first person we hired. You're getting the task now. Here you go. Figure it out, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then be frustrated because it's not as good as it when you were doing it, right? It was like, you don't even know what you were doing, and you're actually asking me to do it, and I'm trying to figure it out. So, that's a great point too, because, and I think if you add an element to that, which is while you're so I want to get rid of this task, for instance, right? There's something about role, what responsibility, whatever. I would prefer to hand this off to somebody else, somebody who's better suited, right? To your point, as somebody who's got the skill set for this particular task, a better skill set for this task, and we sit and we go through it together, because I, as the leader, as the person in charge, I have a certain outcome that I'm accustomed to from going through this process.
Right.
Whatever that outcome is, whatever the, so let's say it's a report that you pull or whatever, there's something I'm expecting to get from it.
Yeah.
So as we walk through it together and I show you why I do what I do, I show you what I'm doing, and then I tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing, and you're looking at it, you can now, not only one, you can, this is how you document your process. You're going to be taking notes so that you remember how to do it. At least I'm hoping you're taking notes. Right. And as you're documenting those notes, you can go through this and you can say, okay, you make notes, and this is why we do this, and this is why we do this, and we do this. Well, now you just documented your process.
Right.
And we can do that for a week or two. And after 2 weeks, you should be competent enough to be able to do it at least to the same result that I was able to get it at.
Right.
Yeah. Depending on what's required and all that fun stuff. And assuming you have a better skill set for the task, if I did that correctly, and I assigned you that responsibility, and for 2 weeks we worked together on it, you're going to begin to, assuming you're the right kind of person, you're going to begin to say, well, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? And we can even learn together.
Right.
Right. And all of a sudden now it's not this arduous task that I'm begrudging, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I have to do this, and I hate doing this, and I put it off till Sunday night at midnight because that's whatever, because it's due by a certain time or whatever, whatever it is. But now there's a collaborative process that takes place.
Yeah.
And we're working together on it. And if you're the right kind of person, if I delegate it to the right kind of person, you're coming in and saying, well, Eric, what if we tried this? What if we do this? Can I try doing it this way? And I'm like, I don't know. I never tried it. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. Well, look at this result. Look at this result. Oh, look at this information. Wow, this is a new set of information we haven't had in the past.
Yeah.
This is actually even more valuable than what we've been doing.
Right.
You wouldn't learn that if you weren't forced to go through that with somebody else and have somebody else's eyes, or somebody else's perspective to draw on and create this opportunity. So, I mean, I think that every business, well, and you know how much I'm a big proponent of Kaizen, which is the constant, never-ending improvement, right? So I'm always looking for, how do I make it better? Everything, every component, and ultimately, I recognize my own shortcomings. So I realize, I'm good at this to this point.
Yeah.
And then, when I get to that point, and if it's something that you're really good at, David, I'm like, David, I need your eyes on this, because it's past it's not my capability necessarily. It's past my discipline to focus on this particular topic. It's not within my wheelhouse, right? I recognize that I know I want it to this point. Once I've got it to that point, I'm content, particularly with the relationship that you and I have now. I'm like, David, I know you're going to do better with this. I took it to this point. Make it better, please. Right? Because we've had that relationship over the years. And I only got to that point because I was willing to, we can go back in the joke that I made with you many years ago. It wasn't a joke, but I said, you're the first person I ever trusted to teach my salespeople, right? To train my salespeople. I came to you and I said, no, I actually am comfortable. I actually would prefer you to train my salespeople rather than me now.
Which I was like, are you sure? Are you okay?
Yeah, exactly. And we're joking about it now, but I remember initially in my own head, I remember thinking to myself, not only am I comfortable with David training my employees, but more importantly, at that point in our relationship together, I was like, I would prefer David train my people, because
but it took a while to get there. Right.
It did.
We trained together and sat through trainings and said, hey, on this activity, I want this particular point to come across this way. I'm like, cool, got it. No, not a problem. Right. And it's that communication and the back and forth of dialing in until you felt like it was the product that you wanted. Right.
No, it exceeded my expectations.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's good.
Yeah. No. And with all jest aside, I mean, literally there was a point I remember, we were in Tucson and I was sitting through one of your trainings and you were doing one of your cheeseburger analogies or something like that.
The old Baconator. Yep.
The Baconator analogy. There you go. But I was sitting through the training and I'm like, the best thing I could have possibly done for our organization at that time was have started that process when we were back in Idaho.
Yeah.
Right. That was when it first started. And I began to let go of the reins and just kind of let you run with it. And I realized, okay, I trust him enough. He's not going to run off the rails too far, and just kind of let you evolve it. And then, fast forward a couple of years later, we're in Tucson, and you're there training one of my teams, and I'm sitting in on the training, and I'm like, this is the best thing I could have possibly done. This is better than I would have done, even at my best. And that was it, but that's it, that's the proud father analogy, not to reference that, but it was like. I am happy that I did that because this is better than I would have done now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the problem is that takes, to your point, it takes patience. It takes discipline. It takes, it takes time.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to take time to do that. Now, it doesn't need to necessarily be years.
Right.
Because it probably only took a few months before you were at least on par with what I was doing.
Yeah.
And at that point, once you're on par with what I was doing, I could now, to your point earlier, I can go back and I can focus on higher value responsibilities, which I had because I had multiple markets at that point.
Right. Yeah. You could focus on driving the results instead of having to train it. Right. I mean, that's huge time savings.
Absolutely. And then you went and did the same thing. You began to teach people to coach or train the way that you trained. And consequently, you built a team around your style, and had a whole team that now you had, some other people like Nate and other guys who came into the group, guys and gals that came into the group that were as good at trainers as you, if not better in some cases. Right. And consequently, that was how you grew your organization.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and it's funny, right? And going back to the beginning, what we talked about is it's difficult at first, right? I'm sure our first session, I don't know what you were thinking, but it probably wasn't, oh, this is great, this is going to work out awesome. It's like, oh, we got a lot of work to. I don't know if this is going to happen, And it's kind of the same thing when you hire somebody new and you're trying to teach them all this stuff. You just got to be patient. You got to trust the process. You got to communicate and set expectations. And I think that's. When people delegate, that's something they miss the most. And you've kind of outlined a bit of a framework here, which is, first of all, why are we doing it? Right. That's and sometimes, honestly, there may be things that you look at and say, I don't even know why we do this anymore. We're not even going to delegate it because it's not valuable to the business. Right.
Yep.
But why do we do it? Here's how to do it. Now leave room for creativity and expansion and ideation and all those sorts of things. And then here's the quality I expect, right? And whatever that task is. And then here's the timing, right? It's got a little mini framework there, but here's, I need it by this time every week, or I need it to be done at this date, or whatever it is, but make sure that's clear, because I often see people mess that up. I showed them why we do it. I showed them how to do it, and maybe even told them, generally this is what I'm expecting it to look like, but they don't give them a time frame. And then they're sitting there waiting, a client meeting or whatever. And, oh man, where's that thing at that I delegated? Oh, I never gave them a specific time frame. And so now, we're left holding the bag, or whoever it is in the organization. And so that timing piece is pretty critical.
Yeah. I would actually go one step further. That is an evolutionary process, because the first time we do it, you wait till the last minute, and then we get the finished product, and we're like, oh, and we have like 5 minutes to change it. Right? Yeah. So what happens, in retrospect, it was like, oh, okay, the next time I give David a deadline, let's put it a day or two in advance.
Yeah.
So we can collaboratively go back and correct anything that may not be ready. Right. And then I get more and more confident, and I'm like, I don't even need to review it now. Right. But that, again, it takes time, and it takes some learning lessons. Like, it's not going to be perfect the first time, or the second time, or the third time.
Yeah.
But even what I gave you wasn't anywhere close to perfect, because if it was, I wouldn't have needed to, well, I say I wouldn't have needed to delegate it. I would always probably need to delegate something, but there to your point earlier, if I was doing for any extended period of time, I have lost sight of what is good and what's working now.
Yeah, sure.
Right. I'll go back to Jim Collins' Built to Last.
Yep.
Right. Stay true to the core, but continue to innovate.
Yep.
And if there's a huge miss in small businesses today, and I say small businesses that don't have the resources to reinvest and develop in their people and things like that, and I'd venture to say it probably goes quite bigger than that, but the businesses that don't do that, they're lost, because the innovation, I mean, at the rate that technology is advancing right now, innovation is probably going to be the biggest biggest hurdle for businesses going forward in the next 3 to 5 years.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's important, right? I think it's here's what I need, right? At the end of the day, it's, I need a report of, accounts that are past due, right? I need it by every Wednesday, because that's when the sales team does their follow-up. So if that's the understanding, how it looks, I mean, it needs to be functional, right? People need to be able to do this, and this, but ultimately, like, give me that, whatever creativity, whatever tool you need. If you need, some resources, a budget, a new software, whatever, this is what I need. And I think once people understand that, and you give them those guardrails, then you'll be surprised at the level of innovation that they deliver if you're hiring the right people, which that's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Maybe a week's worth.
Yeah. But, sorry. You had a thought there? Very good.
No, I was just, as you were talking through that, I was even thinking, when through that process of acknowledging, where to apply, how to apply, when to make the introduction of somebody, hey, this is what you're going to do next. It carries over into every component of your business.
Yeah.
So I think another piece of it is prioritization.
Yeah.
So let's start with the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
The stuff that you can mess up and it's not the end of the world. Right. Yeah. And then, okay, because we acknowledge right up front that we'll be happy to get 70 or 80% of success in the beginning.
Yep.
And then move to 90, 95, whatever that is. But let's start with the low hanging fruit. Let's start with the simple stuff. Let's start with the stuff that's easy. And then as you get that refined, you get that dialed in, let's move to the next thing. Right. And then I can hand that off.
Yeah.
And then we move to the next thing, and then I can hand that off. And this may take a series of weeks or even months in some cases.
Yeah.
But the beauty of one, not only am I as a leader delegating more responsibility, which is giving me the opportunity to go focus on bigger value things, but in addition to that, you as an employee, which by the way, this is a super important component right now, or a topic right now, which is you feel more valued.
Right. Yeah.
You're doing tasks. I'm assigning things to you and allowing you to grow and even use your own flair and judgment on some of these tasks. you feel like a valued employee, which without that, I'm just here. I just show up and do what I'm told. I'm like, who wants that job? Nobody wants that job anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, keep your feedback and ideas to yourself. This is just how we do things, right?
Exactly.
Okay. That guy's going to last 2 weeks and go find somewhere else to work, right?
Yeah, I know I've told you my story about that company I went to work for, and it was the whole blue dot versus green dot or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You're a blue dot. You're not allowed to use the green dot printer.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I understood from an accounting perspective, I understood why that strategy was, or why it was the way that it was. But I'm like, I'm just trying to print a piece of paper for a meeting. I'm like, I reach into my pocket and I pull out a dime and I'm like, here, this is cover my toner and piece of paper. I was like, but yeah, I mean, it's that's a great example. That experience for me is a great example of how exactly not to onboard an employee in a leadership role and give them zero tools to be able to grow and develop a team.
Yeah. Right. No, it's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
No, it's, I think you talked about you mentioned finance there, which kind of jogged my mind, which you'll appreciate this. I'm going to speak your language for a minute instead of the soft people-y stuff that I normally talk about. But there's a financial or economic component of this too, that if, let's say, Eric's the business owner and I work for Eric, and his time is worth, $100 an hour. And my time is worth $50 an hour. Time that Eric is spending doing something that I could do of approximately the same quality and speed, right? It's irresponsible to the business for Eric to do that, because his work and time and that money that we're spending on his time, right, could be spent doing something else that's more value producing for the organization. And I think it's really important, especially from a business owner perspective, to understand that you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your bottom line, you're hurting your profitability when you're doing things more expensively than you need to when somebody else in your organization could do it.
Right. Yeah. Great. Actually, it's a phenomenal example, because as literally from a coaching session yesterday, I had a client, hardworking client, built this business over a number of years, doing really well. And they've built it to, probably over $1 million for certain now. And I've been working with them for 9 months now. And one of the things, the conversation we had yesterday was, well, some of the things that we're doing, that's a big lift. It's a lot of extra work to make this new project. And I said, and so one of the conversations was, this is kind of eating into my profit margins.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and I said to the individual, I said, you're right, it is, and it will. Yeah. And I said, and the reason that it is, and the reason that it will for some period of time, however period of time that is, however long that is, it will, because what you have been benefiting from, what's falsely improving or giving you better profit margins, is the fact that you as the owner are doing some of the production of the business.
Yep.
And I said, and so whatever you take as a salary, which I'm going to openly say in that particular case, that owner is taking a fair salary, but it's not a reasonable salary for somebody who's the owner of their own business.
Sure.
That owner could definitely take a larger salary. Now they take it in disbursements through the profits of the business and all that stuff. So there's good reason behind it. But the point is that they're falsely, and it's not when I say falsely, I'm not saying it's not derogatory. It is what it is, right? I mean, it's just, but it's misleading is a better word to say.
Not unethical. It's just how you're interpreting the data.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly. So it's a misleading interpretation of the data, because the reality is it looks like your profit margins are shrinking. And I'm like, they're not actually shrinking. They're just actually better representation of what really is going on.
Sure.
Because in the past, you were doing some of this productive work, the production work. And the reality is that should have been assigned to somebody else if you were truly doing the role of the, owner, CEO, whatever title you want to claim. Then it would have been represented correctly, because somebody would have been fulfilling that obligation. But instead, you stepped in and did it, which is representing better profits. And now you feel like it's shrinking, and it's like not really shrinking. And actually, it's a more accurate statement now.
Yep.
Because you're stepping back and having other people fill that void and do that work so that you can do the high value things that we've been talking about, which is finding new clients, new bigger clients and things like that. But you're the only today in the business, you're the only one that could go out and do that.
Yep.
Right. Somebody else can come in and do the production work that you've been doing. What you need to do is tear yourself away from the feel that I have to jump in and fix this.
Yep.
Let somebody else do that step and then now allocate 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week to new business development and go find new clients.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's probably another piece. A side note, just a quick thought. That's another piece that owners or anybody in a leadership role has to recognize, that when they do delegate those responsibilities out to somebody else, they should be replacing that with higher value activities.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say, and unless you're working 60, 80 hours a week and you're completely overwhelmed, that's a different story. But theoretically, if you're doing it correctly, what you're doing is you're handing off those tasks and responsibilities. You're making sure that they understand how to do it. They can deliver it as good or better than you. Now you're moving on to something else that's going to bring more revenue, more profits, more whatever to the business, and allow it to grow and scale. But either way, if you're just replacing that's a whole nother conversation, because you could replace yourself entirely.
Right.
Yeah, because you could now you're talking the cash flow quadrant with the Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And you're moving from self-employed to a business owner, and from a business owner in a business owner role, then you move from there to an investor.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So you go from self-employed to a business owner. Well, a business owner, you're still actively involved in the business to some degree.
Yeah.
But when you move from business owner to investor, you walked away from the day-to-day and you actually empowered others to run the organization for you. And I will tell you that most owners, they just, like, the hair stands up in the back of their neck when you talk like that. They're like, "Oh, I could never do that." I'm like, "Sir,
that's where mine went. Is if you got to the point where you were so good at teaching people how to run your business, right, and breaking it down and delegating, and then they know how to take those things and teach the next round of people, and so on and so forth. If you build that skill set or muscle, right, you build that muscle in your organization to the point that you run out of things to take on to make your business better, right? Then you can start looking at, mergers and acquisitions. You could look at, hey, what's that other business you want to start, right? Or even, potentially an exit strategy, right? So those are all of the things that came to mind for me as you said that is, why not go buy somebody else's business who's struggling, take this awesome system and process that you built in your own business, apply it to that business, and keep growing and growing and growing, right? I mean, there's a huge case to be made for that. Yeah.
And if you Walter Diebel, we've talked about his book before, Build Then Buy, or Buy Then Build. And then Contrarian Thinking, what's her name? Cody Sanchez. Yeah. Yep. She's a huge proponent to buy businesses. And one of the first things she says is, I find a good business that's not being fully optimized.
Yep.
We come in and we introduce a little bit of technology. We introduce we recognize where the opportunities might be in that business to make it a little bit more efficient, a little bit more organized. And we can immediately take a business that would have gotten 2 or 2.5x valuation, and we can move it to a 4 or 5x valuation.
Yep.
That's doubling the value for the same dollars spent.
Right. It's incredible.
And just by investing a little bit of time.
Yep.
Right. And having the knowledge. So to your point, when you build the business with all the structures and systems and processes in place, you now have what you can duplicate here, and now you have a roll-up strategy for acquisition, right? You just go out and buy competing businesses that are not efficiently optimized, and you come in and you acquire them, roll them up, and now you have a huge behemoth of a business that you can capitalize on.
Which, by the way, that's something you and I are exceptional at. So if you're struggling with that, reach out to Eric and I. We'd love to help you.
That's right.
So, well, hey, there's something else top of mind for me, and then I'm sure you've got a couple extra thoughts. But one thing that we haven't talked about, we focused a lot on, as the owner, it's important for you to give up some control and empower your people and teach them right, all that kind of stuff, which is all important. There's another important point here, though, which is, as the business owner, you kind of have to be the, I'll say the sheriff, right? That's policing within your business. Are there people that are hoarding tasks and responsibilities? And it sounds like a weird thing to do, that, people really want to do work in my business. That seems like that should be a good thing. not always a good thing, because people get what I call corners of power, and they realize if I can own this one thing and I'm the only one that can do it, then that makes me, irreplaceable. And they feel like that's giving them security. And on some level, it's true. And it presents a risk in your business that if you had to make a difficult decision with that person, or what I call the bus test. I don't know. Have I told you about the bus test, Eric?
I don't know that you've ever used that analogy before. No.
Okay. So the bus test is, I use it on myself all the time, but if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, could somebody come in to do my job? So same thing with that person. If that person got hit by a bus tomorrow, what would that do to our business? And usually it'd be catastrophic, right? Because they're the only person that knows how to use the software. They're the only person with the login, or, whatever it is, right? Or the only person with a relationship to the supplier. So when those things happen, right, it totally ruins your business or sets you back quite a bit. So I think it's important for the business owner in those situations. They've got to be the sheriff that goes in and kind of makes things right and polices that, to say, hey, I appreciate that you really like doing that, and I appreciate the skill and passion you have for that task, but we're going to train a couple other people how to do it too, and oftentimes, it's very valid for their quality of life, right? If you need to take time off, we need somebody else that can do that. Or, something unexpected could happen. You can need leave. I don't want this pressure looming over you. And so you have to force them to teach other people, or teach you how to do it, or document their process in detail what they do. And I think that's something that owners don't do enough, because sometimes it's like, man, I'm glad somebody else is doing those tasks. I'm glad I don't have to do it. And so they feel relieved, when really they should be sensing risk, because that is a risk to your business if people can do things that you can't, or other people can't either.
So the entire time you're talking, I'm going through and calculating in my head of my active clients right now. Of my active clients right now, I can tell you, and I've only got through about half my active clients in my head, but I can tell you, of the half that I assessed, more than 50% of them have a similar immediate issue that we're dealing with or trying to address that relates directly to what you just said.
Nice. Well, not nice for them, but glad it resonated. Actually, really bad for them.
Yeah. But it's dead on. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I'm saying literally more than, as I got through as you're talking, in like the minute and a half you did your summation there, I'm going through it and I'm like, oh, yep. I'm like, oh, and it's, it's different variations of it, but literally in one scenario, two scenarios, deaths.
Yeah. Right.
2 clients, right? 2 scenarios, both scenarios, there was a death in the business, right? Yep. Of strategic people within the organization, and immediately created a major block in the business.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have access to codes. We didn't have access to software. We didn't, and it was like, do you think that the family members would let us have their phone? Because we need to get access to this software.
Oh my God.
And the text message is going to their phone, and we don't have access to it.
Wow.
And who thinks of that?
Yeah.
Right. And that's 2 with deaths. I can tell you another one. I thought of 2 others. One's in a unique situation where there's one person qualified to do a specific task, or series of tasks for that matter, within an organization. And in that particular case, if there's a falling out with that individual, that completely, the business ceases to exist until they relinquish that circumstance.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that I can think of off the top of my head that it's not as critical, but still very important to the business. And if that person was lost in that organization, none of which, by the way, none of these were owners.
Yeah. Wow.
One was an owner, but of the other 4 scenarios, none of the other ones were owners. They're just strategic employees within the organization that, in fact, in that particular case, yields a certain amount of control of a component of the business. So again, we're talking about delegation. There is a risk, right? And that's to make sure that you balance the risk by ensuring that at least more than one person has access to a software program or a task or a responsibility or duty or something like that.
Yeah.
Because like I said, a client that I had, that they had somebody go on leave for a month.
Yeah.
Recently got married, took a couple of weeks. It wasn't a month. It was a few weeks. So 3 weeks or something like that. Yeah. But while that's taking place, they had to restructure the way that they brought on new clients.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, it forced them to do something different than they would normally do to onboard this client and introduce employees to the client to engage with the client. And consequently, they've realized that this is actually a better, more efficient way to do what they've been doing for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Going back all the way to the very beginning, what I said, which was, if you're actively doing it all the time yourself, you can't possibly step back and objectively look at it and say, is there a better, more efficient way to do this?
Right. Yep.
Which, shameful plug, that's why you get a coach.
Right.
Because a coach is going to be able to come in and recognize, hey, this is a great process. My question to you is there a slightly better way?
Yeah.
Or worst case scenario, have we at least hedged our bets that if for some reason somebody in this particular process we're not there, do we have a solution for that? Are we cross-trained or whatever it might be necessary to ensure that we have that in place? All of which most small business owners never think about, because it's not how they're wired to think. They're focused on running the day-to-day of the business.
Yeah. I dare say, I mean, if there was no other value provided, which I know, you go through the 12 steps and your coaching programs are awesome and people should check it out. But if no other value is provided other than an external person came in with a fresh perspective and asked a lot of questions, that alone would be worth the coaching, right? But then you get your expertise and everything on top of it. But there's so much value in just, I haven't asked that question in 2 years. I don't know why we're still doing that. I mean, there's so many things that we get in a rut and we, build those neural pathways and we don't want to change because it's uncomfortable, right? And it's important that somebody comes in, whether it's the owner with, hey, I'm just going to examine my business today, or bringing a coach or somebody to have that fresh perspective. I can't overstate the importance of it.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, as you say that, I immediately go to the 7-bin system at our previous company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't remember how much time and energy went into developing the 7-bin system to track all the paperwork and the retail. But I remember what a disruption that was to the business.
Yeah.
Trying to implement that across, I don't remember, 120 stores, 110 stores we had at the time or whatever it was. And getting everybody to understand this is why we're doing what we're doing, because we spent 6 months analyzing all the different ways that people were doing it. Because as we grew, right, everybody kind of came up with their own way of doing this. But then as you move from location to location, you'd be like, well, why do we do it this way?
Right.
Well, that's how my manager taught me to do it. Well, my manager taught me to do it this way. And so there's all this confusion. So we decided we needed one way to do it. Yeah. And then there was this huge mass frustration with why do we all have to do it one way?
Right. Yeah. Totally.
But you're talking about, analyzing different processes, and we had the operations team come in and look at it and say, okay, well, this is what we believe is to be the best based on all the feedback we got from everybody that was involved in this beta test or whatever. Yeah. And so the irony is that we started rolling out, and then we had all this major pushback from everybody.
Right. Yeah. Change is hard. Yeah. Well, and sorry, you had one other thing you jogged my mind on, which is if you have the size and talent in your organization, it's great to be able to delegate to one person and then a backup, right? I think that's even better, right? Yeah. That's like double bust proof in my terminology. So, hey, maybe I got Bob that could do it and Steve that could do it almost as good as Bob. So Bob, you're going to do it most of the time, but once a quarter, Steve, I want you to do it. So that way, how to do it in case Bob's ever out of the business or, something happens and he's unavailable and, his laptop breaks, right? Any of the number of things that can happen. And then kind of the third layer is you as the owner should still know it well enough that if you had to, even if it's changed and gotten better, that you could plug into it and kind of work through it, right? Ideally, that would be, you'd be that third layer if the first two fail.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then ultimately you become the person that's completely removed from it all. But yeah.
Once you get 3 layers deep, you should be golden. Yep. But cool. Well, any other thoughts on delegation, Eric? We beat it up pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. I think we definitely hammered it good. But I think as I think through, even I literally keep envisioning some of the stuff in the PowerPoint that we did. It was on time management. Delegation was a component of the time management, but. As I think through, I think that you were talking through the process, and it all starts with recognizing that there's a need, right? And there's always a need. There's never not a need to delegate, right? There's always a need to delegate. But recognizing first and foremost, there's a need, creating a strategy on how to begin to do it, being patient with the process, and eventually playing it out, letting it, evolve, and allowing for people, like we talked about, the people side of it, allowing for people to evolve and show their skill sets and develop the critical thinking abilities. Because I mean, at the end of the day, if I have you doing a task and you're really good at that task, but you don't continue to grow, you, like anyone else, we're human. You're going to get bored. Yeah. You're going to get bored. You're not going to want to do that forever. You may not see right now, David, you might just want to be a trainer, and that's totally fine. But I'm telling you, 3 years, 5 years from now, you're going to come to me and say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And you're going to want to go to the next level, whatever that looks like, or some other task. You're going to want to do something else.
Yeah.
Right. Either you're going to continue to progress through that path and you'll want to take on more responsibility to do that, or you're going to want to go a whole different direction. But at some point, you're going to want to do something different. We all go through that process. It's part of our life cycles that we go through and everything. Yep. It's, hey, before I had kids, I didn't really care about that. But now, I have kids and I have this new knack that I want to really focus on being a leadership role. I didn't want that responsibility before, but now I want that for whatever reason. I don't know. But the point is that it will evolve. And so don't be so closed-minded and be convinced that you're not going to want to do that. So an effective leader will realize, I know you're saying no right now, David. I want you to know that when you decide that you want to do something different, come to me. Let's talk about it. Let's see what that looks like. Right. But that's, and it's, it's something as simple as just learning, delegating some new tasks, and all of a sudden that sparks something new in somebody. I can actually tell you for instance, my stepmother, she, years and years and years ago, she was working with a company that implemented a new software program, an inventory software program for a fencing company of all things. And she was on a really important team that helped integrate all this software and did all this kind of stuff. Fast forward a couple of years later, that software company hired her away from the fencing company to help her be a client fulfillment specialist, or I don't remember what the title was that they called her, but basically what she did is she would go into other companies to help introduce the inventory software program that they would develop. They had a platform, and then they would customize it for each individual client. But because she was familiar with it and played such an integral role with that first company, she now had that same skill set that she'd go into other companies and help them integrate it into their companies. Yeah. And that served her until she found a company that was like, and now she's a consultant, and I'm going to say at that price, she's probably pushing a 6-figure income. And they had somebody come to her and say, you know what, we're going to pay you even more if you just come work for us and help us do it on our side.
Wow. Yeah.
So she went full circle. She was working for a company that helped integrate it. Then she went for the consultant for a couple of years. And then she had another company offer even more money to work for them and help integrate that same software program, then develop because she had such a good inherent knowledge. And so over the course of, 5 or 7 years, whatever it was, he probably quadrupled her income over that period of time.
Yeah, that's insane.
And because somebody took the time to delegate this responsibility and put her on this team to learn how to use this software, and it just leveled up for her.
Yeah.
But human nature, people are going to, circumstances change, lives change, and I want more responsibility. In the beginning, she wouldn't have considered that.
Right.
But over time, it evolved, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think, I doubt we have too many employees that listen to this, but maybe somebody are thinking about starting their own business and they're doing some homework or whatever. But I think that's such an important thing is always be looking for new knowledge, new skills. I mean, whether you use it again or not, I mean, there's so many things I've tried and failed, and things that I've fallen in love with that I never thought I would even enjoy, professionally. And you don't know until you get out there and get your hands messy and try it out. And you may think, hey, that was a waste of 2 months, but I learned a lot. So that's cool. Or, man, that was amazing. And now I have a new skill I can take with me throughout my whole life and career. So I just think, you're totally hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I've said this before, but I spent my first couple of years in college learning accounting, only to find out I didn't want to go that route as a career. Right. And in retrospect, it was probably the best serving experience I could have possibly had for those 2 critical years of college where I actually took accounting courses as my
Yeah.
primary courses. Those 2 years laid a foundation for my entire career that have really kind of guided me and allowed me, and it gave me a huge advantage over most of my peers because I understood the business in a way that most people don't.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And continues to serve me today. Right.
Yeah.
That's actually a value play that I have, that I have an advantage over other coaches that don't have that level of insight. And that depth of knowledge when it comes to finances and managing finances and things like that. And just, it's not even, it's deep, but it's not nearly as deep as like an accountant might be, or somebody who was a CFO or something like that. But it's strong enough that I can actually quickly identify key opportunities to fix a business really quickly just by looking at a simple P&L.
Yeah.
Well,
it's the academic side with your experience. I mean,
practical
that
application,
unparalleled acumen, right? And those insights.
Yeah. But it all from a 2-year investment of time.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that served me for 30 years.
Absolutely.
So,
cool. Well, any other final thoughts?
No, I think that it's been a good episode. I guess it was all right. It turned out okay, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, on that note, if you watch some of our other episodes, first of all, if you don't subscribe, you really should. So be sure to subscribe. If you like this format, leave us a comment. Let us know that you like the unscripted format, and maybe we'll do a couple more of them. So, Eric, as always, good hanging out with you. Any updates over at My Biz Coaches you want to share with the group?
We did. Did I announce we launched a new website?
I think so. You could mention it again. Never hurts.
Yeah. We launched a new website. We're continuing to make updates as we go, but excited about all the tools that we're putting in place. We have a lot of over the next 60 days or so before we get to the holidays. We'll have some really amazing tools that'll be incorporated into the site. So, as a business owner, if you want some basic knowledge on certain components of certain areas of business or whatever, you can actually go there, kind of review some of the tools, and we're going to make more and more information available. Actually, you and I just talked through one of the big strategies that we're going to do going forward.
Yep.
And I think that that's going to be a game changer moving forward, and because particularly as we get ready to launch into 2024. Okay. So, but excited about all the changes coming.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, head over to mybizcoaches.co. You can head to .com, but .co is the new fresh site right now. So definitely check that out. We'll link that in the show notes. And I just, again, encourage you, be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed our conversation today. We have conversations like this every week with all sorts of people about all sorts of topics relating to small business and entrepreneurship. And we'd love to share those insights with you. So, Eric, we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.